So someone has to follow Gavin, and you've got me. So I figure this is a bit of a mixtape. It's a whole kind of magazine format, and this is the point where you've just had the dance music, and it goes into a ballad. That's me. So it's a bit of a different pace. Thank you for having me. I do work for the Registers of Scotland. I had a wee goosey at the names when I came in, and there's someone here from the Land Registry, HMLR. Hello, friends. So we are the Scottish Land Registry. We're dinky small. These guys are about 10 times bigger than we are, and they're the English and Welsh Land Registry. And we're all friends, or certainly I've not met one that I don't like so far. And we get to collaborate stuff, which seems ace. So I'll nod to it when I can call out when we've done some collaboration. But yeah, literally some of my best friends work in HMLR. So we're talking about some cliches that I've experienced in my time at Registers of Scotland. I've only been there 3 years, so this isn't the longest talk. But what I thought I would do, because everyone's doing sections, unofficially, I'll tell you a little bit about registers, a bit about the context that we're working in, because that's pretty important to understanding the rest of the deck, and explain a bit about the change process that we're going through just now, and then the little bit of learning at the end with the kind of Jerry Springer thought for the day, which I've realised it's a bit ageist, right, because Jerry Springer's not a thing anymore. So the Registers of Scotland is the oldest continuous land register in the world. Didn't do full Jeremy Clarkson there. We've been going for 400 years, and basically people in Scotland started writing down what they own and who owns it before anyone else, reinforcing a stereotype, right? But it's the only organisation I've ever worked in that's got that kind of sense of heritage and legacy, and it's the only organisation I've ever worked in that celebrates National Handwriting Day, which is fantastic. You can see why. So there's 18 registers, well there's more actually, there's 20 registers under our control, but the two biggest ones are the Saisians Register and the Land Register. So in Scotland, there's two organisations that are responsible for registers. There's ourselves and there's NRS. NRS do deaths, births and marriages. We do land and property. Both organisations have the most senior person in the organisation called the Keeper, which is great. It's the most Doctor Who civil service job title, right? And they are the keepers of the register, and it's delegated authority from the Queen, and they've got seals and all this amazing stuff. And it's just seeping in history and it's amazing, right? So Saisians is the really, really old register, which has been kicking about for a long time. Land Register opened in 1981 and is considered the new register, which is great because it's the same age as me. So I'm still young. This is good. It's the new register. And it's a map-based register, whereas the old Saisians one looks like so. It's all about the handwriting, the words and the descriptors. There's no sense of scale, shape and ownership to that extent, and boundaries and all that kind of stuff. So what we've been doing since the new register opened is moving everyone over. Anytime there's been a transaction on your property, we've automatically put it into the new register so that we're building it up. But we've got an ambition to have completed the land register by 2024. And that's still a big challenge. There's massive parts of Scotland that people don't live in. You know, we're quite intense in places. I didn't bring any of those graphics with me, I should have. It's going to be hard, but we're getting there. So there's a concerted effort to finish the land register. And you go, why do I care? So it's important. It's important when you're looking at a country and you're trying to work out how much it's worth. You know, all those kind of ratings and the triple A's and the double A's and all that come back to certain measures about how productive or how, can't think of the right word, but the housing market and the industry and the transactions that go into it being accurately recorded so that we don't accidentally get demoted because we messed up somewhere. So in that respect, it's important. It's also important if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the fact that the roof over your head, having a receipt for your property, basically, because that's what it is. You've got this bit of paper in well, it's in a digital system now, or in a case bag on our shelves, that confirms you own what you own. So it's pretty ace. And I get a lot of happy feelings. So I was walking through the reception when I was in for my interview at Registers, and there's two offices. There's about 1,000 people, just over, and there's most people in Edinburgh. There's a smaller group of us in Glasgow. And in Edinburgh, they've got this little museum. And you can look at all these old examples of documents and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is pretty ace. And there's a difference between, say, this document and the next one. The last one was almost like, remember when you were at primary school and it was a Friday and you had to finish writing something, you weren't going to get a new jotter till Monday morning, so you're squeezing everything in and writing up the sides and the corners, and it was pretty illegible. That's what the really, really old register looks like. And then there's this change, and suddenly it's got formatting, and it's got margins, and it's got line height, right? And I'm a big typo fiend, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty cool, like that. And I read more about it, and it's down to this man. This is Thomas Thompson. So he wasn't even the keeper. I'm pretty sure he was just a senior registrar in Registers of Scotland, or whatever they were formerly called back then, in about 1804. And he decided that he would change the model. And at the time, in my first viewing of it, I was like, okay, that's great. He's introduced line height, he's introduced good typographic practices, he's made this massive usability enhancement. Hey! But I thought about it more, because in my head I've been like, wonder why? And I went and did some reading, because we've got this amazing little library and all this kind of stuff. And he did more than just format it. When you understand the business model back in the day, the registrars had to provide the paper. Paper and vellum was really expensive. So they were frugal with it, they were really tight with it, and they tried to get as much on a page in order to save themselves money. But they weren't the people that then had to retrieve the information from the documents 10 years later. They didn't care. So Thomas Thompson had the smarts to go, okay, if we get it informed better up front, it's easier to retrieve later. And he had that kind of big picture. So I've now decided Thomas Thompson, Tam, as he's better known as, is the first service designer that Registers ever had. So that is a little bit about us. And my story really starts in 2016. Everyone else has done a little bit of their kind of backstory. I wasn't planning on, but I've done web design, UI design, UX design, user research, and now service design, and it pretty much goes like that. The last 15 years I've worked in government. 5 years before that I worked in agency side. I like government, gotta say. You get to fix your mistakes. It's not all about the billable hours. Those are the two things. The money's not so hot, but it's all right. So 2016, I joined. Registers had been going through a digital transformation or technology transformation for 1 year at that point, and they got a whole bunch of us to come in and help. So we were like Transformers, landing, going, here we are to save the day. And it wasn't that simple. They had all these technology problems from years and years ago, and that was the stuff that they decided to bite off first and fix first. But why were they going through transformation? They're 400 years old. The business process hasn't really changed massively. What's the deal? And as loads of people have nodded to today, it's about 2008. It's about the market crash. So registers are a trading fund, which is a kind of, declining model within government. So right now we don't go to government and say we need X amount of million to run the business for the next year. We charge per update to the register, and that is self-recovery, cost recovery kind of stuff. And that's how they function. So they're cost neutral to the government. And because the 2008 market crash happened and the slowdown was so long and so persistent, we really noticed as an organisation what it was doing to us. And it got pretty tight at one point. And the organisation were like, right, we really have to be more sustainable. We have to be more effective. And there's loads of things we can do. You heard about blockchain earlier. There's things that we can improve on, we can make good on. And that will free the staff up to do the complicated stuff, the curly-whirly documents and the things that need interpretation because it's written in worldy English. And you can't do OCR on something that's got calligraphy in it. It just doesn't work, sorry. So that would free people up to do that. We would ultimately get to the goal of having a digital land register. And when we've got that, all the stuff we will be able to do. It is quite exciting. There's so many opportunities with shared data, open data, all that kind of stuff. But we have to get to a place where we've got that good stuff. So that was the kind of driver for doing transformation in the organisation. Is anyone in a business transformation just now? Is there any kind of weird? Thank you. So it just depends, I guess. Oh yeah, H. Miller, hands up. If you do that at a government conference, there's not a hand down in the room, right? It's just trendy just now. And like I say, the guys had early success, I say the guys in the wider team sense, in divorcing some of the technology dependencies that they had with one of these big superpower tech companies. And it was detrimental to them because they weren't an intelligent client to an extent, and they didn't really know what was happening, and we had an unhealthy dependency, and now they are quite independent. So we have a lot of contractors that work with us deliberately because we don't anticipate transformation lasting forever, and we don't need the Permi people forever. We don't need that amount of people as Permi staff. So it's a healthy balance just now. So transformation was under a year. They closed off all these old platforms, but I'll be honest, there was adoption issues. There was lots of tech things being done to the business. They were throwing things over the wall, expecting people who have done the job for like 30 years, and a massive amount of people in the organisation have worked for them for about 25 years. And they're good at their jobs. They take a lot of pride in the integrity of the register. That's like a really big deal. And these things were just getting fired over the wall. And yeah, we started to see cracks. So we'd built stuff, we tested it a bit, usability testing maybe, and it wasn't being adopted. The business weren't accepting it, or people just weren't using it, and they were reverting back to the existing system that we'd actually hoped to retire. So it wasn't working well, and because of those things, the business as an organisation weren't realising the benefits from the investment. So it would be one thing if it was just a case of like sunk costs and you could write it off, as I'm sure some big companies do sometimes. But we're government and it's the public purse, and we've got to be doing value for money. And sometimes it was looking so optimistic. Senior management took our optimism bias for real. So we were overcommitting, and I say we, wasn't there at that point in time, we were overcommitting to what was actually possible, right? And I think it was for the best reasons. I'm not slagging anybody off here at all. But we weren't doing things joined up. There was lots of teeny little silos doing ace work in places, but that big picture thing just wasn't coming together. I'll speed through the next bit. 2012 Act is another change that we had and we imposed on our customers. So legislation is a major factor, obviously, when your principal customers are solicitors, paralegals, people in the conveyancing space. And we made the most significant change to conveyancing legislation, in at least 30 years. And it didn't kick into 2014, but people are still sore about the changes that have came through the 2012 Act, and it's still impacting the way they work. And again, government have done what government do. They've done consultations. My gut is there wasn't a lot of user research, and they've just enforced these things on the people, on the business customers, as far as we're concerned. And we've been party to that too. So there's all this kind of change going and it not really sticking if you're going to measure stickability. Another background issue that informs pretty much everything we do right now is we've got an arrear. We've got a number of case bags in the organisation on the shelves that have been there far too long. And when I first joined the organisation, someone said to me, "What do you think's different about ROS to whatever else you worked before?" And I was like, people don't talk about the negative consequences of when things go wrong. They don't really have that relationship with the homeowner because they deal with the solicitor principally. So they don't think all the way through. And maybe they do, but they don't talk about it. So one of my colleagues decided to start up this campaign called Arrears Are People Too. And, it really caught on. Folk got it, that if that case bag's been sitting on our shelf for maybe a year, maybe a bit longer, that's someone's property that's not been transacted on. And that's a stressor, right? That could be someone who's passed away, who's leaving their property for their children, inheritance is all going to be tied up. It could be a number of different things. So the keeper we have now went public about our arrear this time last year. And we are actively, aggressively trying to address all these things that are still in the organisation that need moved on, while at the same time we are making sure we're doing it in a sustainable way. So this starts to be my engine kind of analogy, where we're changing stuff, but we've still got to do the things that we're there for principally as a government organisation. So there's two streams here, and I'll speed through them. This is what I was involved in 2017, 2018. Research, it's great, love it. I was asked, I'm going to go in backwards order, I'm not totally sure why now, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Last year, again about this time, I was asked to go out and run a team that was going to do research with our customers. That wasn't new. We do user research in the context of delivery all the time. We've got a team of about 11 or 12 user researchers, designers, some of them do a bit of both. And What was different was we didn't have a brief. We weren't working in the context of a project, so we didn't have the confines of, we're only asking about this bit today. What we were doing was the glue that joins the whole thing up. So you've got all these pockets of research from all the learnings from all the teams over the last year, and you don't know what you're missing. So you know about this bit, there's a gap. You don't know what happens there. You know about this bit, there's another gap. So what we were doing was filling in the blanks, but also just speaking to the customers and saying, what do you care most about? What do you think we could do better? And for them, that was kind of alien. They were a bit like, okay. We also did co-design with them, where we got them back in the office to validate our findings. And that's a really expensive meeting. If you think about all the billable hours of like 30 or 40 senior solicitors and paralegals, there's not an amount of incentive I can give that would balance that out at the end of the day. And that piece of work is still being referenced today in the organisation. So we did it for 3 months. We wrote up a big report, and we've got a real-time board, a Miro board, with all the research artefacts and post-it notes on there, and it continually is the last updated or reviewed board on Miro anytime I go in and look. Oh, wrong way, sorry. I was also involved prior to that in building our first online transaction or online service for the public. So historically, if you wanted a copy of your title, you had to go through a solicitor, phone us up, fax us, or email, or come into the office. That was the only way you would be able to get a copy of the title. And because of all of those ways, you would be at least £18 by the time there's admin and all that worked into it. We've built a system by which solicitors have slightly more access because there's slightly more responsibility in that space. But a member of the public, as of last month, can buy that document that they want for £3. And it's a complete leveller. They've got parity with the solicitors. It's all at the same price. And this is an organisation that has never spoken to that audience before and said, what do you need it for? There's conventional stuff, or there's this gigantic tree at the bottom of my hill and I'm a bit worried it's looking like it's going to fall over, or there's a bit of derelict land at the corner of our street and, stuff's starting to smell a bit. Can we work out who owns it? There's so many potential things in there. And this is a step forward to being able to identify who owns Scotland. So as with the land register completion stuff, that's a big political driver in the Scottish Government just now, is being able to actually say that bit belongs to that person. It's just about the integrity, as I said before, of the register. And I've done it again, sorry. So on the back of working on that piece of work, I had actually elected to be the service designer for it. So I was the user researcher for the first 6 months, and I was about to go off and do something else. And they said, you're going to stay. We've put a new senior responsible owner in there. They're not super technical. You're going to buddy them. And that was honestly the best working relationship I've ever had. And I said, okay, but printed off the job description for service designer. I said, that's actually what you're asking me to do. Are you okay with that? And they were like, we don't care. I was like, cool, ace. So I got to do a year of service design, and it did work. It paid off. So when they were having a bit of a reorg, I got to kind of apply for the job on a permanent basis. And you still had to go through the full interview process, assessment centre, and all the stressors that comes with that. And I had to do my first 100 days presentation. So I lifted from the service design doing book, which is the sequel to service design thinking. And the last chapter, spoilers, is how you embed service design in your organisation. And it had that list there. And I was being a bit cocky because I was trying to put my big girl pants on, go for an interview and be assertive. And I said, start small, we've already done it. You've seen Scotland, you've seen that system where the public can come in and buy their title transaction. And I think I've already got your buy-in, because when I was at the Scotland launch and there was the media there and there was political figures and all that kind of stuff, I heard you guys talking. I heard you saying, we've designed this with customers, not for them. And I was like, where did you hear that? So they've got the mindset. They're really starting to think in those ways, and that's pretty ace, because we're not at the vanguard of public frontline services. You may or may not be aware that government right now is embarking on a social security project, which is epic and huge, and they're absolutely doing it in the right way. But that is pretty much all that people in government talk about at the moment. If you ain't social security, you're not cool. And I've done it again, sorry. I'll keep my finger here. So we're never going to have this huge service design team in the sense we're not going to have more than a couple of service designers in the organisation. And we're trying to work out what skills do we need to grow our own talent in that space, because social security project hoovered up everybody. We can't find folk, it's murder. So user focus, absolutely a fundamental. I want softer skills like empathy, listening and storytelling to be part of what our recruitment is. The HR team are working on profiles. We've based it on DDAT, that's all good. And then they did this reorg and they were like, so you want a service design department? I was like, well, yeah, I thought that's what we'd kind of agreed. And they're like, well, you can have the UXers, you can have the business analysts, you can have the agile coaches. And I was like, you mean I can have everyone out of IT that is a developer or a tester? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And the reality is these guys all absolutely do service design. They're all integral to doing this stuff properly at different levels in different parts of the business, and it's ace. They don't see themselves as service designers. Some of them absolutely don't see themselves as having those skills. So we're doing loads of culture change, nudgy type activity to encourage that, and it's much, much easier to encourage it in junior staff and then let the junior staff show up the senior staff. I'm totally honest. Done it again. So the Scottish Government have an agenda, and it's called the Scottish Approach to Service Design. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, they're just doing that tartan thing that we do, making it the Scottish version. And it's not. It is better than that. It's almost the Scandinavian version, though, if I'm being totally honest. It is about participatory design, it's about co-design, it's about collaboration. And that is amazing. Having your most senior person that's responsible for design in government, the office of the chief designer, her name is Kat Macaulay, she is ace, stand there, meet your head of the organisation and say, Hilary tells me you're doing it this way. It's like, yes, it's fantastic. And she's an advocate that everyone in the organisation has some sort of responsibility to service design. And I can't argue with that, it's fantastic. So that's all about the customer facing, the public stuff, the front of house or front stage, depending on what language you like. And then there's what's going on behind the scenes. So if I was to talk about nummi, can I get a show of hands for folk who know what I'm on about? Okay, that's kind of ace, because I was expecting lots of hands to go up and I'll be like, oh, you probably know more than me. So I work with some really excellent agile coaches. And one of the guys uses this story about nummi, New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated. Yay, I remembered. I thought he was talking about Pokemon the first time. I was like, that's too cute sounding, it's fantastic. So I'll take 5 minutes just to tell you this story, because I really do think it's valuable. But if you're really, really interested, look at This Is American Life podcasts. They've got 2 devoted to nummi, and only one of them you need to buy. The other one's free. It is a joint venture between General Motors and Toyota. And everyone maybe got an idea of Toyota manufacturing theory. It's a proper business theory. Their kind of approach to lean and the principles that they employ have been used across so many different industries now. So there was a dilemma. General Motors didn't have a small car. They were big gas guzzler kind of cars, and you're talking about early 1980s, 1984. And the dilemma for Toyota was that there was changes in regulations and they were going to get charged more basically for import taxes. So they wanted to start manufacturing in America, right? So they both had needs that the others could help with. So they got to a place, they collaborated. Toyota gave General Motors the plans for a small car, and General Motors gave Toyota a factory, and they built it together. So they were using the Toyota manufacturing model in America, and they both got learning from it. So the factory is ace. It was in California, and it was messed up completely. They had shut it down 2 years earlier because the workforce were so dysfunctional. They were coming in, steaming, high, if they came in at all. Sometimes there wasn't enough people to actually run the production line. And they were messing with management, so there was a whole union thing and all that kind of stuff going on. But sometimes they put the engines in cars backwards just to fuck with them, right? It was messed up. And eventually, General Motors got to a place where like, nah, no deal, closing it down. So they had this plant that was capable of manufacturing cars, and it was the perfect candidate to do this pilot, this project with. So when they all joined together, they talked about the workforce, and there was an expectation, I think, that they were going to bring people over and employ them in the factory, but from like the Toyota factory. And they were like, no, we want your local folk. We want to understand what it's like to build cars in America. and they rehired the same workforce. Why? Interesting, right? But they done it in such a way that they taught the guys their practices, and it was an immense, really listen to the audio story because they've got interviews with the people that participated in it. Total spoilers, massive, massive behaviour change. And there was about 3 or 4 fundamental things that made such a tangible difference. So you're working on the production line and something goes a bit wrong and you're like, oh, what do I do? You now pull a cord. And a manager comes and helps you and goes, okay, right, what can we do? And the manager's like, oh, I've never seen that before. Right, pulls the cord again. The whole production line stops and everyone mobs. And that's how they did training. That's how they trained the staff around these particular things, which was ace. And then, they asked the staff, how do you make it better? And the staff never used to see management at all on the floor. That just never happened. They never stopped the production line for love nor money. There's stories of people falling under cars while they're doing some of the work underneath in a pit. And they have to stay there the rest of the day because they don't stop the production line for nothing. So all these things were massive changes in the way that the work was being given to them as opposed to, and that started to change their behaviours. So how can you make this better? Well, I've never been asked that before. But they talk about fabricating tools and doing really bespoke things that, fix a really isolated problem. But everyone has it at that stage in the production line. So if we could just have a screwdriver with a bit of a change at the top, someone goes off and makes it, and by that afternoon they've got the screwdriver and they can actually test it out in action. And it's ace. So the people were actually starting to take such pride in the cars that previously they were putting the engines in backwards on, that they were putting little cards, little bits of paper, in the cars as they were rolling off the production line, so maybe in the flap or down the side, just saying, my name's Bob, I built your car, hope you like it. Or their phone number, so people could actually phone them up and say if they thought there was something up with it. It was amazing. And you're just like, oh, those things really get to me. I'm like, that's cool. So we started doing something really similar in Roz. We don't have a really dysfunctional workforce. People don't appear up to work loaded, and they generally do come in. But change was a problem. Like I said before, things were getting thrown over the fence, and we were affecting change to people. We weren't working with them in making those changes. They weren't stickability, I think. So there was a team, they said, do you want to be a volunteer? Oh, shoot, time's getting away from me, sorry. There's a team, do you want to volunteer to do things differently? Do you want a chance, the operations team, just to try something new out? A whole bunch of people put their hands up, and they were called Capture Once. They knocked it out the park. They came with so many good ideas. I'm sure they had been asked before, but they'd never felt like they'd been engaged like this before. And they were just so up for doing stuff. They've actually really embraced this, and this is our new business model. We are supporting the people in doing things differently, and we've called it buying and selling, not because they are actually involved in buying and selling, but that is the point of the customer journey that they do, and that's why we've decided to adopt the language of our end user. And we're doing loads of great stuff with people, and their satisfaction scores are through the roof. So civil service have this whole government-wide survey that they do every year, and we don't come out of it very well, if I'm being totally honest. And there's no great reason for it, because life's not bad. But I also know that they don't force people to fudge the surveys. They absolutely let people answer them honestly. And this particular group of people, because you get some sort of segmentation on the surveys, their scores compared to their peers are through the roof, as is their productivity. It's ace. So they're doing things in a different way with no help from any technical support, purely process driven. But they're using agile techniques, they're doing lean processing, they're systems thinking. And this is guys that, maybe have only been in the organisation 6 months, which makes them completely newbie babies. And I had discussions with the team that were running it, and I'm like, this feels a bit the wrong way around. They've not done any customer engagement. This feels like inside out as opposed to outside in work. And my colleague found this quote. I'll say it slowly, right, or it's a tongue twister. But the more efficient you are at doing the wrong thing, the wronger you become. It's much better to do the right thing wronger than the wrong thing righter. If you do the right thing wrong and correct it, you get better. So his argument for doing this was, if you're doing all this amazing customer stuff and you've identified all the changes that the customer wants to make, the organisation needs to be ready to make them. And this group of people are ready to change. So it's worth doing both at the same time and changing their tweaks to be adjusted to what you know the customer needs, but going for the long tail of embedding change with these guys, because it takes a while. So what we have done is brought the two things together, right? This feels like service design to me. We've got people looking at front stage, we've got people looking at backstage, and now you've got this purple track. So this is what we're working on right now. We're amplifying the success stories. And again, I've heard that a few times today about the amplification of doing things well. These guys are our best advocates in the organisation. It doesn't matter how many senior managers stand up and say, this is working well. People talking to their peers and saying, I have never enjoyed work as much as I do right now. It's fantastic. We're also a service something team. So there's 5 or 6 of us senior managers that are rewriting the organisational target operating model. This is not what I thought I would be doing in my first year as a service designer, but it's an amazing opportunity to do it from a user-centred perspective. What we have learned, and this is not one of my slides, you might be able to tell, because it doesn't look that nice, but also strategic deployment and time span of discretion is about how we engage with different people in the organisation. So when we're talking to the executive, they think in 3 to 5 year time spans. When we're talking to a development team, they think in 2 weeks. If that, they might think about the story they're working on that they need to get done by the end of the day. And there's no point in using the same messages to talk to one part of the organisation as you do the other part. You have to customise the communication, the strategy, the deployment. You have to do it in the most appropriate way. So I'm sitting somewhere in between the kind of senior management and operational management and trying to talk and be a buffer for the teams that are right down at the bottom so that the senior managers don't come down and expect to hear stuff about years away when those guys are in the moment thinking about tomorrow. And we're trying to manage that. This last slide is where the engine stuff comes. So this is the model where we've taken one little part of the organisation and we've moved it over. It's actually a Gartner model called New Co, Old Co. So you're growing your new organisation from within your old one. You're still being functional, you're still delivering on your public task, but you're doing it in such a way that it's gradual to a point where it's tipped. And more people are working in this new way than in the old way. So we actually got to speak to the Gartner analyst that came up with this, wrote the paper and all that kind of stuff, had him on the phone, and he was like, all right, you're doing it. And we're like, uh-huh. He's like, nobody's done it before. And we're like, okay. But it's working. Because the whole way through, we are capturing so much data about everything that we touch, whether it's from the end user stuff or the guys in the operational space. We can show and evidence the difference in a way that we've never been able to before. And one of my new teams is a quantitative research team, and there's a business analyst, an MI reporting team, and they all join forces in being able to help us evidence this stuff. So whether or not Mr. Gartner thinks that his paper was, disposable and folk wouldn't notice it, and we've anchored our whole business model around it, bit scary. But in conclusion, I'm going to give you another line from the Scottish approach to service design. And it's about designing with people, not for and certainly not to them. If you can include them, do that co-design, that participation stuff, the change sticks much, much better. And okay, there's a bit more effort up front, but you get to realise the financial turnaround stuff much better with more confidence.